So thanks for joining the panel on disrupting last mile delivery and logistics with micromobility. So for me, it's one of my passion topics. We haven't talked enough during this conference here, I would say. So I'm glad to have this panel here together with stakeholders from the industry representing, like on one side, the hardware suppliers, also platforms, and then consumer-facing platforms. And I would like to kick off this panel with like a short introduction round. So I would like to ask each of you to tell you, the audience who you are, what you're contributing to the disruption with micromobility and logistics and last mile delivery, and then maybe also some words about like the secret sauce of your company. So what makes you special in like this environment we are all in? So Murvah, do you want to start?
Nice to meet you all. My name is Murvah. I'm the co-CEO of Hived. We're currently operating in the UK. We're disrupting parcel delivery. So we actually do the middle mile, but really focus our innovation more on the last mile because that's the area that we see the most broken, and how last mile delivery can change, be innovated to suit the future of our cities. We know cities are getting more congested. Vans and vehicles aren't fit for purpose in those urban environments. So how can we deploy sort of a mixed fleet approach for parcel delivery and get the scale, make it scalable as well? So not just sort of a niche service. How can we actually take this sort of scalable across the UK, across Europe?
Thank you very much. Josef, do you want to continue?
Thanks. Josef, working for Walt. For those of you who do not know what Walt is a Finnish platform. We're originally from 2014, last year acquired by American DoorDash. We are 8,000 people at Walt. We have around 180,000 courier partners in 25 countries. We have a few 100,000 merchants on our platform and some couple millions of customers on an average base. We were born with takeaway in the restaurant industry, but I would say we are more like your future mall in a pocket. At least that's our aim. And I think from a disruptive perspective, our aim is to make all the cities better to live in and how we then can contribute with that with our platform. I currently work with this special weird title called Special Project Manager, which is always relevant to be asked. One side is I focus on the real estate part where we operate what has been named as dark stores or banned stores in some countries. We operate around 120 of them in currently 23 different markets, and I'm focused on getting them more sustainable. And on the other side, I'm working on urban mobility and micromobility. Good to be here.
Thank you very much. Michael, do you want to continue?
Sure. Michael Johnson, one of the co-founders of ZOOMO. We are a fleet solutions provider, specifically to businesses like Hived and individual couriers who work for companies like Walt. We are in 6 countries, 20 to 30 cities. That changes from month to month. And specifically, our secret sauce is our ability to provide flexible leases, specifically for light electric vehicles. There's not a lot of financing options out there for this kind of new vehicle type. And ZOOMO can do that as well as choose the right vehicle type for the right solution.
Thank you very much. Adam, do you want to continue?
Hi, Adam Barmby. I'm the founder and CEO of Hived. We make pedal electric last mile vehicles, typically sort of reverse engineered a van down to a bicycle. I think our special sauce is that we spent the last 4 years heavily disrupting what goes on in London, and there's over 250 cargo bikes now running around London today that you find it quite difficult to not see one doing a job of a van. So we are directly replacing vans with our vehicles, and we've now spent 4 years sort of brutally developing the platform, and now you can't break it, which is useful.
Thank you very much.
Great,
Pieter.
Thanks. I'm among titans, I feel. But so my name is Pieter. I'm leading the B2B marketing activities at Urban Arrow. Urban Arrow is a bike manufacturer. We started building cargo bikes for family usage, I think back in 2011. So we have quite a track record. We kind of invented the electric bike, the electric cargo bike category, if you say so. And over time, we've learned that customers not only appreciated riding the bikes with kids and bringing the kids to daycare and then going to their work, but really wanted to use our platform, but also for business purposes. So basically the company slowly started to integrate and develop new products which were really geared towards solving business challenges. Last mile logistics. I would say the secret sauce of Urban Arrow is that we got acquired by PON in 2019, which is great. And I think the additional secret sauce is that we have a dealer network, which is about 800 dealers across Europe, but also the United States, which are able to sell both business bikes, but also family bikes to both companies, but also individuals. And I'm happy to be with the panel with you guys. So thanks a lot. No?
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction. So I will close this introduction round. So I'm Augustin. I work for MHP. It's a consulting firm. And my contribution to the space is that we work with cities and operators how to bring then micromobility vehicles and like the setups into cities and like in the processes of those companies. Very glad to have this panel here today, and we would like to kick off the discussion with like the status quo. So I think a lot of happened in the last couple of years. So my first approach of implementing micromobility in logistics was 2016 in London, where we wanted to like roll out some cargo bikes for like laundry delivery. It was a complete fail because the vehicles were not ready, infrastructure were not ready. So a lot of things changed. So my first question would be, so how is micromobility today like implemented in like the city infrastructure and then also like in the supply chains we have? So Murvah, so what do you see there today? What has changed? Where are we today?
Yeah, I think there's just, well, on the panel here already, you can see ZOOMO, Urban Arrow and Eve, like there's a lot more solutions than there were a few years ago. I think if we were starting Hived, let's say in 2016, I think it would be a complete different story. I think there's still a little bit to go though. And I think on the whole infrastructure of the roads and the government and the councils, making it easier, making it safer, especially in London, and making it a bit more accessible for every single person to be able to ride a cargo bike. So I think there's a little bit of work there, and we spend a lot of time on that. And also shifting the perception as well from the consumer perspective on, that you can use bikes in this for parcel delivery. I think there's a little bit of education piece that we've had to get around with that with the consumers, but definitely partners, on this panel, and I know sort of like different operators such as like Papaya who make it easy to kind of manage fleets and all these new tools that are launching. I think there's so many at this conference today. The whole ecosystem has made it a lot easier to be able to A, manage a mixed fleet, and B, sort of implement it in the real world. And I think we're only going to get there sort of together as a collaboration and pushing it forward. I think if we were, like you said, starting 2016 trying to do it ourselves, just deploying cargo bikes, a lot more difficult. But yeah, I think together with collaboration, it's made it a lot easier. I think we at Hive focused initially, we've kind of put out the cargo bikes, but didn't have the required density. And I think it involves a lot of density and scale to actually deploy cargo bikes at scale. And that's what we focused on the past 18 months to get to that sort of critical mass scale point where we can sort of be doing lots of drops with sort of the solutions like on this panel today. So yeah, it's been a learning curve, but I think now there's definitely possible to use the sort of mixed fleet cargo bikes and different solutions, especially in urban environments. But yeah, a little bit more work to do, especially in London. Being in Amsterdam has been super nice because you can see how great the city's built, and credit to Amsterdam for doing an amazing job. In cities like Copenhagen, I think London has a lot more to do on that side.
Cool. Thank you very much for this perspective. So Josef, how is it at Walt? So how is like micromobility implemented in like your supply chains? What part is it in like on a like consumer facing platform?
Yeah, I think Murvah has already touched a lot upon it, and I think that like the whole evolution of collaboration between units, I think that's one of the biggest learning curves we've had, is that it's been very difficult in the past few years of where to turn to and whom to turn to when it comes to regulators and municipalities and such, to really get the discussion going on not having a negative perspective on the commercial side of what we actually want to do and want to achieve, and that we wanted to collaborate from the start. But of course, at the same time, we come with a mass, and that mass is our consumers. And at the end, we're trying to be customer obsessed. And with customer obsession, we've tried to adapt. Mixed fleet, as you say, I think the mixed fleet is definitely what we will see going forward. But of course, even in a city as Copenhagen, where I live, which is similar to Amsterdam, where the infrastructure is in place, but regulation is not in place. So even if the infrastructure exists, we are having difficulties deploying and scaling the fleet because of or non-regulation, and having difficulties with discussing with the right stakeholders. So I think like the collaboration between everyone, and also as I mentioned to you earlier, I do think that in these such conventions as here, that it requires that stakeholders from both sides collaborate, that we're not only listening to the commercial side, we're not only listening to governance, but that's a collaboration on building the future of, if it's hubs, if it's parking spaces that need it, if it's infrastructure on bike lanes, that's a collaboration. And we are seeing developments, but of course, when you operating in 25 countries, from Azerbaijan to Kazakhstan to central Copenhagen, the demand is very scattered. One of the I think, biggest difficulties with the infrastructure of micromobility is what ZOOMO represents, is someone offering a vehicle to an independent contractor who potentially just arrived in a new country and wants to be able to contribute himself or herself by working. And starting up as an independent, you have no financing, and who wants to finance an independent contractor? And these vehicles are not cheap. So financing has been the biggest, I think, issue, and what we're trying to solve on a daily level is how can we actually offer a fleet to the courier partners with a financial model that's sustainable.
Okay, thank you very much. So you guys talked a lot about partnerships and collaboration. So Michael, what is the role of partnerships? So how important is it for you at ZOOMO to scale your business, to partner on one side then with like the vehicle manufacturers, but also then like with the demand-sided platform? So maybe you can elaborate on that.
I mean, it's in essence just allows us to move a lot faster and provide solutions to, our customers, better solutions faster. We've got a similar mission to a lot of people in this room to accelerate, our cities to carbon neutral, and we'll get there faster if we work together, especially in what is a more limited resource and funding environment right now, which I think everyone's feeling. I think back to last year, the ZOOMO delegate that kind of came here was all product team. And it was kind of, we were telling you what we were going to build. This time around, where we brought the partnerships team. So Maria and Chris are over there. Hello. Which I think kind of tells you sort of the switch in strategy and the importance of partnerships. I also think that it does actually make more sense. Partnerships make more sense now, and I think you touched on it, Murvah, where 4 years ago, when ZOOMO started, we were calling ourselves a vertically integrated sort of e-bike platform. And we were vertically integrated really because we had to do everything ourselves. Nothing existed. There was no e-bike at the right price point that was like made for commercial use cases. So we went and built it. There was no fleet management system for LEVs. It was auto fleet management systems that we were kind of, gerrymandering to work for us. So we ended up just building all these things ourselves. We had to go get a whole new different type of financing for these new vehicle types. Again, I think to Murvah's point, if we were doing this now, we would probably go straight for the partnership route. And it's, the ecosystem that now exists has come a long way in a few years.
Okay, one follow-up question there. So you mentioned like the different areas of partnerships, so with banks or financing institutions, with then vehicle partners, and then also the demand partners like Walt. So where would you say is the biggest, or where do we need more effort on to move on? Is it more like the financial part or like vehicle parts, or what are the challenges you see there at the moment?
So I think Volt and players like Volt, they've always been pretty keen to partner. I think one of the barriers that I've noticed in the last sort of 12, 18 months is in the sort of Volt kind of platform is just identifying the difference between a cargo e-bike and a bike, or even sometimes like an e-bike and a car on their platform. You think those kind of tech things would be pretty quick, but it's it does take, it's a pretty big change. And I think that there's a little bit of chicken and egg at the moment, there's a question around whether the ZOOMO model for e-bikes will work in cargo bikes. It's a lot more expensive. You can't. Can you take these things home and park them in the street? Will they get stolen? If it is stolen, who's going to pay for it? But I think more importantly, even if we could make that happen operationally, is there enough work for a courier with a cargo bike to kind of pay that off over the month and for it to be worth it? And I think, again, that's kind of where it's a little chicken and egg at the moment. And, ZOOMO will work with players like Volt to kind of pilot that and hopefully sort of expand it out.
If I may comment, I think that when you're looking at delivery, I think we should not be scared to say that cars still represent a huge amount of deliveries. So, of course, I think that the right answer right now is how do we get our courier partners to shift from a car, fossil-fueled car or fossil-fueled moped, into a different type of micromobility vehicle. And therefore, of course, what we're also seeing, if we're shifting from the car to another type of vehicle, the demand for storage space is, of course, growing. And there, of course, hence the cargo bike or VOC of this world or whoever is doing bigger vehicles on 3 wheels, 2 wheels, 4 wheels. I think that demand will come. But the hesitation is coming from what we are hearing from the courier partners is a lot on understanding the vehicles. So where can they move? Where can they park? What about the battery usage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all, I think the more we're learning, and of course, if there's no regulation in place, the hesitation to actually move from an existing vehicle, and if there's no financial model to incentivize them, they're not moving. So I think it's like the sustainable approach that we in this room might take on an average everyday level, saying, hey, this is the obvious choice. Maybe it's not the obvious choice for all those people. So I think we need a lot of work on elaborating for them on why they should and why they could. We could incentivize it by saying, okay, cleaner deliveries would get more money. So of course you would incentivize that. If you do a bigger delivery, you get more pay. So I think it's like all these platforms also need to work together with the providers on how we will evolve that.
Adam, you want to add something?
I think that's what my role is in this. I'm basically designing and developing products that enable people to move away from that legacy operation. It's the legacy operation that's killing the planet. It's not the fact that we can't change. We know we can all change, but unless you show someone how you can do it through a product that's managed through a service, you're not going to be able to get people to adopt it. You're going to have to lead the way, unfortunately. So by designing and challenging the norm. And not just saying it's an electrified version of what we've already got. We're able to then, design something that you can fundamentally not just get someone out of a car and into a cargo bike, for example. You can make them earn twice as much a day because these vehicles are 50% more efficient, minimum, at doing the same job in that urban environment. And actually, the other thing that we look at as well is 50% of the time the human's off the bike. So actually, it's the way they operate and sort of integrate their working flow with the vehicle, so the operational costs can also be massively maximized by every single second costs a penny, basically. So all of the touch points on the vehicle need to be robust and also need to be enable them to make more money at the end of the day. And if you can incentivize them through effectively monetary reward, they're going to then adopt.
Thanks for that. And coming back to the partnership question, so you're have two tricky situations or challenges, I would say. You have a very unique vehicle you need to develop and produce, and then you need to bring it to the market. So how important are partnerships with then ZOOMO, Hived, Volt for you and the go-to-market approach?
Probably, if you reverse engineer about 3 or 4 years, we started off the business as a partnership with DPD. I went to them and basically said, you've got some cargo bikes in the corner of your warehouse and they're all broken. Can I make you something, please? And they basically created the brief for me. So I didn't make what I wanted, I made what they wanted. And it's as simple as that. So you have to have those partnerships all the way through the development of a product, otherwise you'll just end up making the wrong thing. So partnerships from old into new partnerships for today. You're learning every day. You've got to continually upgrade vehicles. You've got to continually be better, and again challenge the norm and use data as well to drive those development changes.
Okay, thanks for that. Perfect segue to the next question, more about then data. So Peter, I think you're like in the game since years with your cargo bike. So what are the data points that you see that are very convincing? So in terms of then maybe economic benefits, speed of like then delivery, etc. So could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So the common approach to telling the let's say the USPs of cargo bikes would really be it's cheaper, faster, and more sustainable. I mean, there's so much research being done on both academic level, but also more sometimes really on kind of like company level or like usage level, where left or right, I mean, the sole conclusion you get to every time is it gets using a cargo bike in delivering small packages is the most energy efficient solution available on the market, even more energy efficient than using drones, for example. That's one, and also in terms of CO2 emissions, the impact is the least using a cargo bike. So given sort of the, let's say, the narrative we're in Europe, where really the Green Deal is picking up and emissions are you know, left or right have to be kind of be moving down across the continent, but also across the world. I see that this cargo bike or cargo bikes as a category really are part of the solution going forward. In terms of cost effectiveness, I mean, buying an electric van, let's say a Nissan, I think for the price of a Nissan, you can buy 5 cargo bikes, right? So it doesn't make sense also to make the investment in the van while you can move more goods with 5 bikes in the end. So that's how I see how cargo bikes actually are part of the solution going forward.
Another point to add there as well is the actual infrastructure costs to putting in a fleet of electric vehicles in the centre of an old city where you can't get the power into that city. You know, we're working with the Royal Mail, for example, and they've got 12,000 depots across the UK, and it's going to cost a minimum of £250,000 per depot to upgrade the power. They can't convert their fleet to electric. So this is a much easier and faster way to adopt EV.
I think if I can add to that, because we started off with cargo bikes, moved into more vehicle fleet because electric vehicles, because we needed the density to use cargo bikes. I think the main challenge that we've had is having enough providers at scale to build them, which is great that we now have them, but also on the financing side, from a business perspective, there's a lot more insurance, finance solutions set up for vehicles and electric fleets. And when we're looking at the bike insurance, there's so many hurdles that we have to overcome to get our sort of couriers insured on them, and sort of the actual financing from a business perspective. Like, there's just not enough lenders out there to kind of, and you will know that that's a huge challenge that we've had to overcome, and we're working with innovative providers constantly, and you know, and that part of it has been the biggest challenge and shift. And I think if there's a way that we can work together to get over that hurdle together, like we would love to deploy more of these at a quicker pace. It's just, can we get the insurance, can we get the financing as ready and available? When you speak to an insurance broker for an electric vehicle, it's like, yeah, you can do it in an hour. When you're trying to insure, you know, an EV or an urban hour, you have to go through so many hoops and boundaries, and it's so expensive. So that, you know, as a scale and rapid growth that we've grown at, that's not been something that's also grown in this space. So I think that's a huge hurdle that we have to overcome soon from a business perspective of a fleet operator that's, you know, caused us some restriction of adopting sort of these solutions quicker.
Okay, thanks. So that's perfect, leading to the next part of our discussion. So you mentioned it's like cheaper, it's less emissions, it's also faster. You added on that. So themes are great, yeah. But you mentioned, Joseph, that most of deliveries are still done by cars. So what's your perspective on that? So why don't see more like micromobility vehicles for delivery? So what are the top 3 points that are maybe missing that would do the trick?
Top one, as I mentioned, is the fact that the people who have to acquire them cannot afford to acquire them, and the model doesn't exist on a large scale in 25 countries to convert. Then, of course, there is the fact that the data, as we talked about, and I think you said it very nicely, is that the providers such as us have not had it so easy to come up with the data on actually shifting or adding that new vehicle type into the platform. So, of course, that's something that needs to be refined, is that what's the data that we actually have on the vehicle type currently, and is it an electrified vehicle or not? Is it a micromobility vehicle? And the data we will prove, we need to use then to the business case for the courier partners. And then I think lastly, it's definitely also to the fact that if there is no legislation in place, why would we want to incentivize something that might change next week? So if we're moving 180,000 people plus, and 30% of them would be running in a car, let's put a number to it, then there, of course we don't want them to be liable for the fact that they might have to change again because it's not written in stone that they are actually able to contribute with that type of vehicle that they might choose. And when I go around the fair here for the last 2 days and discussing with the providers or the manufacturers, and when you ask, so which regulations does this vehicle fall under? The comments might be that currently there is no regulation. So we've done this vehicle because there is no regulation in place, but there might be, and then we'll adapt. But if you tell that to 180,000 people, will they change when the one that they are riding currently falls into every regulation? So I think, again, back to that collaboration between the commercial parties and governance, in order to transform quickly, we all heard about that transport is the biggest sinner. It's also the biggest part to the emissions. So of course, the sooner we have the rules written, we can change much faster.
Okay, thanks for that. So Michael, I think you're like operating globally in Europe and Australia and the US. So do you have like a kind of role model or a good example that is doing the regulation part very well, and has there like a framework on like city or national level where I would say, okay, that could be an inspiration for the whole industry?
I'm definitely not the expert on this kind of thing, but I can share, of the cities that we, or the countries that we play in, the sort of the cities where cargo bikes make most sense. In New York, it's just the most dense, or Manhattan specifically, it's just the most dense operation or environment. And the only way you get around is via cargo bikes. And I think the delivery, the portion of food courier fleet that is cars in Manhattan is like less than 5%. In London, I think you have, it's kind of somewhere, but it's pretty dense, but there's been a lot of like pro e-bike or anti-car regulation, anti-congestion charges, the ULEZ scheme, which has made it pretty hard for cars to get around, expensive for cars to get around in the last 5 to 10 years. I think when we started in London, there was actually only 5% of the fleet, of the courier fleet was cars. That's not really changed in the last 5 years because it was already pretty low. What has changed is the proportion of the fleet that is bikes. They're pretty much all now e-bikes. And what I'm more excited about in terms of the shift going forward is when e-mopeds become, the unit economics for a courier on an e-moped becomes comparable to the petrol moped. Because at the moment, or in the last 12 months, it's not quite been there. And you just have, as many petrol mopeds on the road as you do bikes in that space. So I'm pretty excited to see that shift happen over the next few years as the technology catches up. And then, hopefully we'll see more cargo bikes as well. And then I guess, Paris is also the extreme version where they've just had a local city, local mayor go really hard, really quickly. And I know you guys have been to Paris in the last, year or so, and if you were there 5 years ago, but it's just so different. And those are our biggest cities, and they're often, a lot of companies here. That's often where they have the most business as well.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Adam, so what's the role of regulation for the success of your business? So is it like, and what's the status? Like, is it kind of like slowing you down at the moment, or
I agree. It's definitely stopping. It's a question that people are asking. There is obviously no EU-wide legislation for cargo bikes. There is one being, sort of talked about and created, and I'm sure there'll be a heavy cargo bike market legislation that we fit into. All I can say is, of all of the rules that are out there right now, we fit within them all. My major thing is that e-bike rules weren't created right in the first place anyway, but common sense isn't going to prevail, unfortunately. It should be a maximum weight, a maximum size, a maximum acceleration, and a minimum deceleration. And that's it. There shouldn't be power ratings and all the rest of it, because you can make these things go very quick if you want to. but you don't need to go quick. You need to be reliable. You need to accelerate up a hill, and you need to pull away from a junction safely. So there's, if there was a way we could actually come together and create a proper set of rules, it wouldn't be very difficult and it would be pretty quick to do. But how do you do that? I don't know.
Okay, interesting. And Pieter, maybe a last question for you then also. So, I mean, you are like in this game like very long. So what were some, let's say, some changes on regulation side where you have seen then like a pickup of then the demand for like cargo bikes, or maybe not regulation, maybe it was then also more infrastructure. So looking at your history, so what were the main game changers that really pushed your business?
Yeah, sure. So I think if we go back to the existing sort of the first couple of years of Urban Arrow, we saw that whatever product we produced, it was adopted by the market right away, like in a snap. So we had to kind of just focus on scale, right? So by the time we were just building a couple, 1,000 vehicles, but now we're a tenfold of that, right? So that's where we've been focusing on. In the Netherlands, it was very easily adopted. But one thing I'm not hearing yet in the panel is that some things and sometimes in some countries actually have also still a cultural barrier, right? So in the Netherlands, it's like super normal to ride a bike, and and also a cargo bike is super normal. But if you go to other countries or other cities, the infrastructure is not optimized for cargo bikes or cycling, and it still feels a bit unsafe. And I think that cultural factor is also very important in the adoption of these technologies. And I think, as Michael said, like things moving fast in Paris, infrastructure improvements, and I think we as an industry, but together with you guys in the public, I think we're all part of the movement going forward. So we should really repeat, amplify, and really bring out those stories so it becomes more normal, right? So the culture should be more oriented towards riding a cargo bike. It should be normal to get to that point instead of cars and vehicles and other stuff. So I think that's very important. In terms of legislation in the Netherlands, it's a bit of a checkerboard. I mean, there's talks on the European level going on about legislation where does it fit in. I'm not involved on that level of detail, but I do know that, again, also our product, but also our future products are going to be within the limits, which is very important, obviously, because it kind of gets to a point where people can rely on the product and know that when they buy the product, they can actually use it for the years ahead.
The main thing with the legislation should be that it makes them more safe. At the end of the day, there are some cargo bikes out there that are nearly a ton. That's not a bike. Yeah, it should never be a bike. And that's the one thing that I want to make sure that does happen, is that there is a weight limit to it, so that you don't drive down the road with a 1-ton bike that could mow down a child, because then that's going to ruin it for everyone. Yeah,
I think that I totally agree with that. And I think another factor which is also super important is both safety, but also reliability. So over the past couple of years, we've learned that these bikes, reusing them for business purposes, it gets much more sort of much more power, much more. The bikes are obviously used much more intensively than used for family purposes. So at Urban Arrow, we focused really hard to optimize the total cost of ownership. So we look into all the different components, so we can see where we can make adjustments. So for example, last year we launched a partner with Formula brakes. So those brakes can last about 20,000 kilometers, right? So in terms of service, you need less service and you can keep up the uptime of the bike, which is awesome. And I think that's what, in the end, businesses also want, right? So they want a product which can rely on, which is safe, and just does the job as frequent as they want it to do.
Okay, cool, thanks. So I think we are at the end of the time we had, like our panel today. So any last thoughts from any of the panelists? Or what is your vision, or what are you looking forward in the next couple of years? What's your inspiration there? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're all saying the right thing. I think we all want to work together to get to, smaller vehicles in cities and, micromobility solutions. I think the regulation, the law, that needs to change as quick as we're all trying to move it. And I think that's the key lever here. I think we're all doing our bit, trying to push that, but kind of restricted in some areas. So I think that's the key thought that I'm taking away from here. And hopefully more sort of, I guess, financial solutions as well to make it more viable at scale.
Cool. Thank you very much. So that's it from our panel here today. So thanks for listening. And then thanks for you all. It was a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of the conference.